All right, there we go. So thank you for joining us tonight to learn more about By Their Side. My name is Jana Vermette. I'm the Director of Quality Assurance for the Community Employment Partners Program at Abilities Network. We are so excited tonight to hear from Kathy Vecchione and parent and board member Mary Scott from By Their Side. I'm going to turn it over to them, and we're looking forward to hearing more about By Their Side.
Thanks so much. It's really wonderful to be able to talk with everyone and help Maryland families learn more about By Their Side, because it seems like we're the best kept secret in Maryland. By Their Side's been around actually since 1965, which is kind of a bit of a surprise probably for people who haven't heard of us yet. I just wanted to do a quick introduction of myself, and then Mary will introduce herself and get us started. We have slides to go with our discussion tonight. I'm the executive director By Their Side. I've been in this role for about 8 years. I've been with By Their Side being an advocate for probably around 12 years, and I continue to be an advocate. And prior to that, I was at service coordination for 20 years. Back when it was a part of the ARC of Frederick County, we did service coordination for central and western regions and worked with about 8,000 people. I was the 5th employee. I mean, it was that long ago, and we were very small then. So I got to grow up with the agency. And for the last 10 years as a director for central region and then central and western regions. So I have a lot of history and experience with advocacy. This is the most exciting, I think, job in the field, because you get to really do, I think, what matters for people. And what I like about By Their Side in particular is that because we are not funded by DDA, we don't have obligations to DDA. So our focus is on advocacy and on the services that families kind of arrange. And that's what we get to continue to do. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mary.
Hi, everybody. Hi, new friends. Hi, old friends. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to see some of these faces I haven't seen in a very long time. My name is Mary Scott. I've been on the board of By Their Side for several years. And as of July, I'm now the president of the board. Whoa, big deal. And I'm delighted to be here tonight. For those of you who know me, this will be repetitious, but I've been around for a while. I retired from the Baltimore County Public Schools after 43 years in special education, starting in the city and then doing home and hospital teaching, doing parent advocacy, working for Baltimore County's Resource Center. I started Hand in Hand, for those of you who are in Baltimore County Public Schools. And then I was a person who never stayed in a job longer than 5 years for a good long while, just as I never lived any place longer than 5 years for a good long while. Well, I've been in my current house for 35 years, and my last job I had for 19 years. Because it was the second best job in the state. Kathy had the first, but I was a transition coordinator for the transitioning youth in Baltimore County. And nobody really understood my job, and nobody paid any attention to me, which was great. It meant I could be a loose cannon and really advocate for families in sort of a non-traditional school system way, which was a whole lot of fun. And that's how I got to meet a lot of the people on this screen tonight. Now, how did I know about By Their Side? Well, before I get there, I have a daughter who I cannot believe just turned 41. I know I look way too young to have a 41-year-old, but she just turned 41. Yeah, she's been home with us since March 13th after being 9 years out in her own lovely condominium with support, but she's been home now. Wow, was that an adjustment for all three of us? And every day's a new day. Today was a really good day. Yesterday, not so much, but we're all hanging in there. So Annie is 41. She went through the Baltimore County Public Schools special education system. And for those of you who've been around for a good long while, Fran will remember this, Dr. Berger, she was in the first class at our school superintendent allowed to leave a special school and go into neighborhood school. So that was the first year of Annie's experience outside a special school. And oh my gosh, it was great. So she went to Cockeysville Middle School for middle school. And then by the time she was 16, she finally got to her home school, which was Towson High. And then she graduated at 21. So, as all of you know, if you have adult children, it's a lively world out there with employment and housing and residential support and living at home, and we all do the best we can. And I like the fact that there's so many families represented here tonight, because it's the connections with families that really have made the difference for me over the years in brainstorming good solutions for Annie's situation. So stay connected. It's so important. It's really important. And that's actually sort of one of the things I'm feeling isolated about in the last umpteen months, is I feel like I'm not having those connections. But I know I should just get off my duff and create a Zoom account and just start connecting with people. That being said, I learned about By Their Side probably 20 years ago through work, and I don't know how. And we've been signed up with By Their Side for years and years. We signed up when Annie was young, because I thought, well, I always think if I get run over by a bus, I don't have to be old. I can be young and get run over by a bus. So I wanted to know that there was somebody out there who would be a good advocate for her if I am not here. Now, I am married. I have a lovely husband. After 39 years in the special education system and the adult service system, I can say with confidence he doesn't understand it. He relies on me. Yay, surprise. And, there are pieces of it he does understand, and he asks good questions, but in terms of knowing the nuances of how to navigate a system, I'm sort of the one, and I'm not always the best at it either. So we're a team and we make good decisions together. But even if I weren't here and he were, Annie would need By Their Side to guide him. And I can say Kathy's already guided me about some things that I had given me information that I had never heard of. I love the organization because it was founded by parents for families. Kathy will tell you that one of our previous board members was quite literally a rocket scientist and smarter than anybody else you will ever know, and set up this algorithm, this financial algorithm, so that we can be sure that if our investments stay on track, we will have the money to support people with advocacy for them long after you and I are gone. So that was really important to me too. I like the fact that the organization supports families and people in the really creative ways that they do. And Kathy will talk more about that because she has lots of stories to tell, because we're big storytellers. So that's who I am, how I got here, what I'm doing with By Their Side. I'm sort of driving everybody crazy at By Their Side, because I'm always saying, why can't we do this? Why can't we do that? Just, Fran, you recognize that behavior, I know. So, we've grown a lot, and we're continuing to grow. And I look forward to being a resource to any of you who have more questions or would like to talk about a personal experience. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Kathy now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mary. And thank you so much for serving on the board. You have lots of great ideas, and you do keep us on our toes and keep us busy. But as those of you who have worked with Mary before know, she's a real resource and a real asset. So it's a pleasure, really. I am going to go ahead and share my screen and get us looking at our little PowerPoint for today. And I hope everybody can see it okay. We good there, Jana? Okay. And I'm trying to move this over there. Okay, so here we are. So we were founded by parents, and their big concern back in 1965, when they were a group of parents involved with the Arc of Maryland, was who's going to be there to advocate when we can't be here any longer. And back in those days, there was no service coordination, but things have even changed. Then service coordination came about in the mid 80s, and since then, there's still good reason why parents are continuing to consider, who's really going to be there. So that's how we came about. Some important things to know about By Their Side is we're a nonprofit, but we're family funded. So families pay a membership fee and arrange the services, or they pay for the annual advocacy plans and arrange the services. If they set up a special needs trust, some of them, arrange for their trustee to do that after they're gone to have more intensive services. It all really depends on what the family wants to do. But the need that we're answering is the future advocacy piece. Even if there are siblings, who's going to help support the sibling? It took you, think about how long it took you to figure out A, the education system, and now and then B, the adult service delivery system. And the siblings don't have the advantage of all that time and all that knowledge that you gained over the years. So we're there to support their advocacy, to provide them information, to be a sounding board, to be someone who can, give them suggestions and I'm sorry, I just totally lost my train of thought. Hang on one second. Maybe assure the quality of life, really look into things like that. And for siblings that are out of state, we're kind of the local eyes and ears. We can visit as frequently as is needed. There is a sibling who is in Connecticut and is concerned about what's going on with her brother and has us going out twice a month now, but things are getting better, and then that will back off, and we won't need to continue to do that because things are getting resolved. But so we're available if it's needed, and it's just really important for siblings to have that resource. So I'm glad that we're there for them. In addition to that, we meet with families when families first enroll their son or daughter, and kind of gather information about what's important to the person, what their needs are, what we need to know to advocate, but most importantly, what are your concerns for the future for your son or daughter? Because you know them the best, and the things that are keeping you awake at night are the things that we want to know about, because that's the core of our file and our information that guides the advocate in the future whenever they get involved. So we try to carry that information forward and make sure we're looking out for the right things. If there's a special needs trust, we help to make sure that teams are aware that there are additional financial resources, because quite honestly, for the most part, people in the service delivery system have SSI, and that is all. And it's very rare that people have a special needs trust. In fact, it's so rare that teams typically maybe don't really understand what a special needs trust is or how to access it, or they'll know that there's a trustee and they assume that the trustee is going to reach out to them, and they don't want to be seen to be, trying to get their hands on people's money. So we just make sure that, if there's needs, we're like, well, there are some resources. Let's figure out how we can use those resources. And then we communicate directly with the trustee about, this is the need. These are the quotes, that you'll need, and this is the reason for it. And would you approve it? And so we facilitate and make sure that those requests get made. And then we can monitor back and make sure people actually got the service, and that things are moving forward. And overall, the advocates are really looking out for the quality of life for people. What really makes a difference for somebody is what's happening in their life that reflects their preferences and their interests, and how can we build those in, and how can we build on them from year to year? Because just because something's going really well this year doesn't mean we want to continue the plan next year. It means we want to figure out how to make it even better next year, and give people more opportunities, and look into new ways that people can enjoy things. And we're also looking at health and safety. When we go to visit somebody in their home, we look at their medical file, and you can see from the medical file, there's agencies, of course, are required to have an appointment record filled out that includes what the doctor observed in his assessment and what he's recommending, and if any follow-up should happen. And then we look for the follow-up, and usually that's fine and everything's going smoothly. But on occasion, there are some agencies that's not really their strength, or in particular, maybe that's not that house manager's strength. So we're there to say, well, what about that, and we're just there to kind of move things along and make sure things happen. So I feel that that's been a really critical role for us. There's also safety issues, especially as people's needs change. Maybe what once, when they first moved into an agency, maybe that everything was fine and they had, and they were safe and their needs were being addressed. But as people get older, sometimes, we become less firm or less sturdy, our mobility is a little more challenged. And, so those are some things that we just, the advocates just kind of keep looking out for. There's a man that I worked with for many years. He is a real joker. I mean, he would walk into his annual planning meeting and say, look around the room and say, hey, the gang's here, and which was really neat to be a part of his gang, honestly. It was kind of an honor. And then, his house manager would get to talking about the guy, and we'll call him John, that's not his real name, but say, John, he's such a card. He'd be sitting there going, all of a sudden he'll be sitting in the living room in his chair and he'll yell, I'm blind. And then they'll look over at him and they'll say, John, open your eyes. And he'd go, I mean, he was just always joking around. But there came a time when he was really in a bad mood all the time. I mean, he was cursing, he was not happy. They would take him, he had a psychiatrist, they would take him to the psychiatrist who was increasing his medication. And then when the advocate learned about this, she went back to our records that had the historic information from the family, who had told us that John's prone to falling. In fact, when he was in his 20s, he fell and broke his hip. He has hip replacement that's not expected to last his lifetime. And John does not express his pain verbally. He doesn't say, my hip hurts. He expresses it through behavior. And so the advocate, of course, ran back to the agency and said, get his hip checked. And they did. And that's what it was needed. But had it not really been for that family planning ahead and making sure that information about their son was in a record and was known, he would have probably been uncomfortable maybe for his lifetime. Who knows? Because at this point they were treating it as a psychiatric issue, and who knows when that ever would have been resolved. So it wasn't that long later that he had the hip replacement surgery again, and he was happy again, and he was back to his regular self, which was wonderful. It was a really good outcome, and I think it's really important for us to honor the fact that families do plan ahead like this. That's wonderful. I believe that the family had also informed the residential agency of this, but this happened like 20 years after the family passed. And the residential agency files get so big that the old information goes, kind of gets moved out into storage lockers and things. But for By Their Side, with the information from the family, that's core to what we do. And our whole role is about advocacy. So that always stays in our file, and it's always available for us to assist people as we need to. So let's see, where are we now? So there are some services that we do not provide, so we'll just get those out of the way. We don't provide guardianship. We don't provide medical consent. We don't serve as the trustee of a special needs trust, and we don't serve as the representative payee for Social Security. There's also another one. We also will not advocate for institutional care because we believe everybody can be served by the community and through community resources. So those are some key things. So that leaves us with, so what do we do? So we just do advocacy. And we provide that support that you're doing currently when you can't any longer. And we also provide support to families who are advocating and who have learned a lot and who can see what the issues are, but because of maybe their role as a family member, they feel like they're not getting any traction or getting maybe listened to. And so it's sometimes helpful to have a second person at the table with you. So some families get us involved now while the parents are still around, just to try to move things forward. And what's really key to this piece is that it's kind of about who the advocates are. I mentioned my background with service coordination for like 20 years. And back in the 1980s, when I started there, the mid 1980s, the agency, the Medicaid waiver had just started. So people were instead of the federal government funding people to live in institutions, they set up the Medicaid waiver, which allowed the federal money to be shifted out to community services. And that let the state move a lot of people out of institutions into the community, because the state didn't have to pay for 100% of the services because the federal government was paying for half of it, which was really a big boost. So with that transition, there was a big expansion of service providers, residential and vocational agencies. There was a huge expansion of service coordinators as advocates. And so there was a lot of growth back in the 80s. And if you look at the time that's gone by since then, what we have now is some really experienced advocates with 20 and 30 years of experience, who really understand the service delivery system. They've had a wealth of training about self-determination and the importance of people's rights, and and how do you work together as teams. And those people are retiring from the system, and those are the people that we hire as advocates. So it fits really well actually with retirement, because an advocate might work with like 5 people who get an annual assessment visit a year, and then maybe 5 more people who get visited quarterly, and that's their work for the year. And so you think about that fits in beautifully with retirement. They get to keep their identity, they get to use their skills that they developed all those years. But most importantly, working directly with people with disabilities was always the best job in the field. And it was the first one you get promoted away from, if you're talented, and you're moving up in your career. So there's a lot of reinforcement. It's a really nice partnership. So that's the piece that I think we offer to families and to sons and daughters and to the siblings, and is knowledgeable advocates. And we work with the teams and the other advocates, with the team members, the service coordinators, the coordinator community services, and we work in partnership. And a lot of times we're kind of like helping to educate. If it's a newer advocate, if it's a newer service coordinator, we can kind of fill them in. Some of the service coordinators are really knowledgeable and great. We just work together with them, but it's great. And we also try to, if we understand what probably needs to happen, we talk to the service coordinator and try to help them, get moving on that. So we try to use our resources and our knowledge about that. Let's see. So the key thing about By Their Side is we have we only provide advocacy, and families get to decide when the advocacy service will start, whether it's tomorrow or if a problem comes up or after the parents pass away. And then they also get to decide how often we're going to be involved. So there's one of our services is kind of more of an annual assessment visit every year for the lifetime, or some people get quarterly visits, or it can be flexible from one year to the next. So that's the thing, is that because we're family funded, families get to make these determinations and these decisions about that. So this little map these are the 3 kinds of services, the 3 names of the types of advocacy services. But the key point of showing you this slide is that you're not in one or the other. It can overlap. Sometimes it can overlap, 2 or 3 of them can overlap, or it could be, like I'm not receiving active services yet, but I have an advocacy plan, or I'm receiving both, or whatever. It's not one or the other. It can be whatever configuration that you need. So I'm going to talk about each of the different kinds of services and or the programs actually. So the Lifelong Advocacy was the original program that was created by the founding members of By Their Side. And so they were concerned with who would be an advocate for my son or daughter after I'm gone. So this service starts when the parents, as the sponsors of their son or daughter, when they pass away. And so they would enroll their son or daughter, and they would pay a fee that gets invested and has a chance to grow to provide this lifelong service. And the lifelong service is really an annual assessment visit every year for the lifetime of the son or daughter. And usually we coordinate that by attending with the annual planning meeting, because that's when you can really influence what's going to happen for the person for the year. So we get involved with the annual planning meeting or if for some reason we miss that, because sometimes the new service coordinator, and sorry if I keep calling them service coordinator, I know they're coordinators of community services, but that's just the one that comes more naturally to me because of my history. But sometimes we're not invited because we're out of the loop, because it's a new service coordinator and they weren't aware. So in that case, we'll do a home visit. So what we do is, as as we, attend meetings or do the home visit and there are concerns that are identified, then we address those concerns. If there are needs that are, that are identified and there's a trust, we can help facilitate a request from the special needs trust. And, we involve sibling advocates. Sometimes siblings are a little concerned when they first get to know us about like, how are you going to, interact with me? What if we disagree on what should happen? And we're really there to follow the siblings' lead and to support their advocacy. And if we have other information that we think maybe the sibling wants to reconsider that, we share the other information and let the sibling decide that. But we recognize families as kind of having that key advocacy role when they want to take that role. And that's not always possible for some siblings, of course. Okay. And then let me go back 1 second though. I forgot. Let's see. Just let me catch up with my notes here. So let me go back here a second. So there, one person who was in the lifelong advocacy program, she had developed some Alzheimer's when she was in her later 60s. And you're talking lifelong advocacy. This was well past when her parents passed away. And she had been well served for many, many years. But when she developed Alzheimer's, she had some difficulty sleeping. She wasn't really engaging in her day program activities. She was going there, but then she was falling asleep. And if they were going out, she really didn't have an interest. It became a lot less productive for her to be doing that. And things didn't seem to be going real well for her. So we had a team meeting and the advocate had said, DDA will transition funds from a day program to a residential program, and we could consider retirement. And she was actually very interested in that. And the team was like, okay, well, let's work on that. So they did make that happen. And so what happened is as a result of that was that she could sleep later instead of getting up at 6:30 in the morning to get on the bus to go to the day program. So she could sleep later especially when she wasn't sleeping well at night. She had a one-to-one staff with her during the day. So at some point during the day, every day she was going out for short outings, to something that she enjoyed doing, but it didn't have to be a full day that maybe the younger people could keep up with, but she was getting too tired for. So she went for shorter outings, and then she could rest. She could take a nap if she wanted to, and it worked out really well for her. But it was the By Their Side advocate who happened to have the information about the retirement. I think the other team members were newer at that point. So there's a range of things that we are able to help people with. There's another guy who was somebody that we served who was in a hospital. The advocate called to check in on him and found out he was in the hospital and went to go visit him. And when she got there, he was in urgent care he was in a hospital room. He was alone by himself. He was intubated. He was really anxious. CNN was playing on TV and they were calling him Charles when his nickname is Chuck, and he never goes, it's like, so there were a lot of things going on that made him really unhappy and very anxious. So the advocate talked with the nursing staff and also posted a note on the wall with his nickname, that he likes the, TV Land channel at the time, that he likes this kinds of shows, and things that he likes to help him feel more comfortable when he's, while he'd be in the hospital away from people, the kinds of things he might like to talk about or the way he likes to joke with people. And then the advocate called the brother who lived in Colorado and said, this is what I saw. This is what's going on. Do you have resources to provide a companion? Because I think he would really benefit from, having someone there with him. He's very anxious. And so they flew in the next day. The brother and the sister-in-law flew in the next day. They were with him for like 3 or 4 days. And then the brother had to fly back to work, but the sister-in-law stayed with him. And so he was able to have that support. And, and he said, we would have never have known. And it's just a partnership that you appreciate if you can't be there in person. So I think that's pretty telling of, how we can work together with families. And so let's go back. So here we have the Lifelong Advocacy Program. The membership fee is $3,500. And if you're 70 years or older, it's $4,000. And the reason for the difference is, we need to invest the fund, the membership fee, and give it a chance to grow some before we start providing services, which might be more, happen more quickly if you're up in age. And the step increase actually came about as a result of the actuarial study that Mary was referencing earlier, where we look back at what are the ages of the people that we serve, the year of birth and of their parents. What is the Social Security mortality tables are figured into that, and what is, so we know and we figure life expectancy being 80, which is actually high for people with developmental disabilities. And what is the income that we have each year? What is the growth on investments? What are our expenses? There's a $50 membership fee that families pay when they first, while the parents are still, or the sponsor is still living, they pay an annual membership fee, but that stops when they pass. So how does those figures all, this is a huge expansive table, and it's got many parts to it. But it gives us a really good way of looking at, with all those factors into account, we can adjust the interest and find out what interest rate would we need to earn in order to serve the last member when they turned 80 years old. And we can see how much of a buffer we have, and the board can decide if that's enough buffer or not. And that's how we know when to adjust. The board knows when to adjust the fees, and they don't adjust the fees often. We're doing well. Currently, the investment fund is 1.4 million. We follow a very conservative investment policy that was created by the board years ago, which is no more than half in stocks, so it's half stocks and half bonds or whatever, so that when the stock market takes a tumble, we don't get hit as hard as most people who are investing maybe a little more conservatively or aggressively. So as a part of this lifelong advocacy service, we will, we mentioned we provide the annual assessment visit, address the concerns, facilitate the trust requests, and provide updates, reports, and support the sibling advocacy. Another service that we provide is the annual advocacy plan, which some people will use in conjunction with the lifelong advocacy service. But it's a contract or an agreement that we sign, we discuss and we both sign each year. And it says, the families decide how often do you want us to visit and do monitoring visits, or if there are other, do you want us to monitor with the day and residential agencies to see how things are progressing, whatever. And so there's an $85 an hour fee for people who are enrolled in the lifelong advocacy program. And then if you're not a member, like in that way, then it's $100 an hour. And then there's some discount member packages. So it can cost less if we're involved more often and we're visiting, monthly. We don't, it takes us a little less time because we don't have to catch up on so much, so it's a little easier. So we are able to discount that instead of based on the hourly. So, otherwise it's pretty much that core service that's with the lifelong advocacy, only it's just more frequent. And so some sample fees and like some packages. So if we were doing quarterly contacts, and you were a member, so you get a 10% discount, it'd be about $12.75 a year. But if you wanted to also contact the agency in addition to that, and contact the day and residential coordinators and monitor the plan or whatever, then it's a little bit more. The monthly contacts around $3,600, and those are based on the current rates. And it's really up to the family about what they need. It can change from year to year. And sometimes people have an annual advocacy plan and then stop it later. So an additional service is that short-term advocacy, which is, like some examples of that are, there are 3 people whose parents contacted us for help with planning for their future because their daughters, actually in each of these 3 cases, there were 3 people, 3 different families. Their daughters were found by DDA to be supports only eligible and therefore they would not be receiving funding for services and supports basically in the future. If your supports only eligible, they don't really fund that category. And so they said, so what do we do when we're trying to plan, and can you help us plan? And so we went out and we met with the family to talk with them about it. And in each of those 3 cases, after we heard more about the son or the daughters, what their abilities were, what kind of supports they needed, and things that happened for them. We're like, no, these people are actually full service eligible. They, even though they would not need full residential services, their health or safety would be at risk if they don't have the support that their parents are currently providing while they're living with their parents. And that's really clear. So what happens is, and I know this because I've trained a lot of service coordinators, is that the people who are actually maybe don't have an intellectual impairment, or maybe they have a lot of capabilities, those are the people that it's really tricky to discern eligibility. And if you have a new worker who's coming out to do that, sometimes they miss it and they just don't get it right. And so, so we developed a plan. We developed an updated report for DDA, and in each case they turned around and said, you're right, and they gave them full DDA eligibility. In one case, the person was served the same year, so that because of the age of her mother. These are older parents who are getting in touch with us at this point, because they're really concerned about the future. So some services did start more quickly. There was also a guy that we worked with who had an anoxic brain injury when he was a teen. He had some surgery, and he was in a nursing home for several years, and then he came out and was being served at a residential agency. Family member, thank goodness, filed suit actually, and so there was a settlement which would help him through the years, and the trustee involved by their side. And so we thought, okay, well, we don't know very much about an anoxic brain injury. Can mean anything, many things, and it depends on the person. So we arranged for a neuropsychological evaluation, and so they identified that he had a short-term memory impairment, which nobody knew before. And that meant that when he basically was not able to really recall what happened 4 hours ago, and that really explained why some of the staff involved with his his residential service, and we'd go out and visit, and somebody'd say, did you get to do this? And he'd say, no. And they'd say, yes, you did. And they would think that he was lying and trying to get him in trouble. And he just couldn't remember. And it really helped the team to plan adequately for what his support needs were, and to make sure that there was the sufficient oversight. So, that was something that really was a role that the By Their Side advocate then ended up continuing, because despite the fact that it was originally a shorter term involvement, the trustee decided we really need somebody out there monitoring regularly. And that's been a very good, had a very good outcome over the years for this guy. There's another woman who, when her parent, now this wasn't short-term advocacy, this was the annual advocacy plan service, when her parent passed and she started services, the advocate, used the information that was provided by the parent, but has been working with her for probably 8 or 9 years now. And meanwhile, there's kind of, it's a service delivery system. It's hard to maintain people in positions. And so there's been a lot of turnover with house managers. And the advocate has been able to help to inform the house managers the ins and outs of, supporting her well, and how important it is for her to not be supported by someone who's kind of like a caretaker, but somebody who wants to get to know, understands her independence, and then supports her to be as independent as possible. Because she's a very short stature, and she appears almost kind of childlike, but she's not. And she has a really hard time with that. And so when people have the right approach to her, things go really well, and she gets to do a whole lot of things because she's very capable. The other issue for her was, if she's provided like potato chips for snacks, that doesn't have enough nutritional value to kind of maintain her blood sugar level. And she has some real, what agencies would call behavioral issues, but really it's just a matter of low blood sugar. And so when she gets given like cheese or, peanut butter and stuff like that, she's fine, so it's good that the advocate's there to just provide that transition over the years. So the short-term advocacy plans are funded like the annual advocacy plans are based on $85 an hour if you're enrolled in that lifelong member service, or it's $100 an hour if you're not. And but we don't really have packages because you can't anticipate how much time is going to be needed, and it's really up to the family or the sibling or the trustee or whoever involves us to say, this is what we want you to work on, this is the problem that we're experiencing. And so sometimes it's a matter of us going to planning meetings with people, or taking the lead and contacting the agencies to try to resolve the concerns that the parents have, so that they don't have to feel like they're rocking the boat. I know that's kind of difficult when you know that you want somebody to take good care of your son or daughter to be rocking the boat. So that's kind of the lifelong, the short-term advocacy plan. So as that earlier um, um, graphic thing of the overlapping circles goes, you can have one, the other, you can go back and forth, you can have, so it really can be a range of services. So if you were, so going back up to the lifelong advocacy service, in order to get started with that, I just wanted to give a quick overview of that. People would enroll, is to be eligible for By Their Side services, you need to have a developmental disability and be eligible for DDA services. And the reason for that is because in the future, when the parents are gone, we need to be able to access the level of funding and the services needed to make sure that the son or daughter is going to be healthy and safe. And if there's no access to funds because they're not eligible for services, we wouldn't be able to really provide that assistance. So that's one criteria. Where that person also needs to live in the state of Maryland, like they can't be over the line in DC or whatever, because the advocates here really understand and know the Maryland service delivery system very well, but they're different everywhere. So we wouldn't be effective elsewhere. So once you decide you want to enroll, and then you send in the application, and then evidence of the disability, an evaluation so that we can better understand the nature of the disability, or even the current person-centered plan if they're already being served. And a lot of people already are because they're in vocational programs. So that's fine. And then the board reviews it. It's actually really quick these days because we do it by email. And then once services are or enrollment is approved, then you have 2 years to pay the member fee. So we can send you a quarterly invoice over 2 years, and you can pay it by pieces. Some people just pay it all at once. And once that's done, we go out and meet with the family, and I'll go out and do an intake interview, and hopefully your son or daughter would be there. That's not always possible, but that's ideal. And so we kind of try to learn about the person and what's important to them, what's important for them, and what are your advocacy concerns for the future. That's the biggest thing that helps us the most, or is the things that that you're looking out for when you visit, because this happens or that happens, it's going to mean X, Y, and Z will follow. We don't want that to happen. So we want to get perspectives from families, and that's where we say we try to carry that piece forward. And we also kind of gather information through an individual profile. So you can let us know. And it kind of asks the parents to work with their son or daughter to the extent possible to fill it out. But what's important to them? If they're having a bad day, what makes them feel better? What are the traditions, the family traditions that they like a lot, so that in the future, like, what does a good Christmas look like now? So we can try to let agencies know to incorporate some of those things, or maybe not Christmas and Hanukkah or whatever celebrations, and what is there something special that they always like to do for their birthday, and wouldn't it be nice to be able to continue some of those? So we try to gather that information and have information from the family be the core of what guides us. And then the last thing is between the time that we do the intake interview and you should pass away as the sponsoring parent, we have an annual meeting of sponsors, annual meeting of families, and we have guest speakers talking about current information that's important for families to know. It's a luncheon, so you can network. It's always fun. I enjoy that a lot, and there's a lot of people that like to attend that. And then families call us up for information or just to discuss problems, and we just consult with families over the phone. So we're available as you need us. And then down into the future, we do have something we call a notice of membership to my executor. And it explains that you've enrolled in by your son or daughter and By Their Side, and what we would do, and then it's a pre-funded service, and that we need to be notified upon your passing to start services. So we really rely on parents to set up that notification to us. And we also hope that you will keep us notified if you change your address, because we want to keep in touch, and we will send out updates periodically. And so we do take initiative to find these things out. But in the end, it really works well for us to get involved in a very timely way. And the best way to have that happen is if the parents can let us know. Okay. And so so I've gone through kind of a lot of things. I'm sorry. I'm going to go through some frequently asked questions a second, but I want to just pop back and make sure I didn't overlook something that I wanted to tell you about. Because I have some notes here. Excuse me a second. Um, okay, so I'm going to go into some frequently asked questions. And how does By Their Side work with the sibling advocate? Well, we kind of talked about that already. We let the sibling, not let them, but the sibling takes the lead and we follow their lead. And some are very involved, and others just simply can't be, or they were once, but then they moved out of state, or they have family now, and people go through periods of their life when they're busier than other periods. So we can step in and be more involved and help with that. And we just kind of keep them updated. We work together with them. And we provide information and referral, and I think we just really work on forming a partnership. So that's what they can count on, and I think that's been really beneficial for a lot of people. I don't know if anybody has specific questions. We can go into that afterwards. And how do we work with the trustee of a special needs trust? um, you know there's basically two kinds of special needs trust in my mind anyway. One is a relative, and they are involved, and they are kind of managing the purse strings, and so they're kind of Johnny on the spot because they're going to go visit, they're going to be at meetings, they're going to hear what's needed, and they can just make sure that those things happen. But for the trustees who are attorneys or who are bankers or investment fund managers, they stay in their offices, and they kind of rely on somebody contacting them about the needs. And so we make sure that that happens. And so we work very closely with trustees, and we also do follow the families who create a special needs trust will often do a letter of intent. And there are some good samples. We do have some samples of letters of intent. If anybody needs one, just email us afterwards and let us know. We can send you a link. But the letter of intent is supposed to guide the trustee on how how the parents want the special needs trust to be used. But the important thing about a special needs trust is it's a discretionary trust used at the discretion of the trustee. So he doesn't actually have to follow the letter of intent. But we do, because we usually have the letter of intent in our files from families as well. We've been able to kind of hold trustees to that a little bit more than if it was only in their file. So that's been helpful. But we basically work, partnership with trustees. And well, there was another question. Oh, will By Their Side be there be here in the future? That's of all the questions, people will hear about By Their Side, maybe give a call, we'll talk on the phone, and then they'll ask if they can meet with me. And I believe that that's probably the most pressing question that those families have, is how do we know that you're going to still be here? And the best thing I can say is, well, we've been here since 1965, which is a really long time. The actuarial study that I mentioned really does serve a great purpose in helping us kind of at least get a sense of whether we're on track. There's nothing that can be perfect about that process because it was designed. It's it might, there may be a flaw in it, but it does give us a really good sense from year to year about how we're going. And we have a wonderful pool of advocates. There's currently 16 or 17 across the state of Maryland. They have a wealth of experience, and they have their contacts from where they came from because they've all been advocates, and we've been just kind of gradually bringing people in, and we take the opportunity to do that, and it's been really beneficial, I think, for the people that we're serving. So I do believe that we'll be here in the future. We've already transitioned executive directors. The person who was executive director, Beverly Rill, when I started, had been with By Their Side for 30 years. She was originally the office manager back in the days when it was actually run solely by the board of directors. And then the whole organization made that transition from a board run agency into administrative run agency. And we are very careful to run a lean shop. We have myself as executive director, I'm part-time executive director, and then I'm part-time as an advocate. And then we have an administrative assistant, or actually we'll probably, she does that and the financial pieces as well. And she's working several days a week. and we're pretty lean. And then the advocates are contractual, so we just pay them for the hours they actually work. So we've made that transition. I think, if we get bigger and we need to, we can grow. But our advocacy plan services have been growing, and that really helps to offset our administrative expenses, actually. So it's really helped us to not have to overdraw on the investment fund for people's future advocacy services. So, does anybody have other questions?
So Kathy, we had a couple questions come in on our chat. So let me read them for us. Our first question, and I think you answered this, but we'll read it anyway, just in case there's anything you want to add. It said, can you spell out how the financial/subscription works? For example, does the membership fee pay for hours of advocacy, or does it just pay for the right to hire someone and pay for them?
Excellent.
So it seems like we don't need to have a membership fee we can pay for advocacy hourly, right?
Yeah. So let me hop back here. I'm going to hop back here. This is a part.
Sure.
So when you enroll when you enroll as a member, we refer to this as membership. In the lifelong advocacy program, and you pay that one-time fee, well, plus the $50 a year, but you pay that fee, that covers the annual assessment visit that starts when the parent sponsors pass away for the lifetime of their son or daughter. And that annual assessment visit, which usually occurs with the annual planning meeting whenever possible, that's pre-funded and will always be paid for. So if you decide that you also would like to have an annual advocacy plan to increase those visits, then these rates here that were mentioned were actually for if the parents were still living, honestly. So the fee for this includes right now the fee for going to that planning meeting, but it would be less than that. It would probably be around $900 or something. I can't remember off the top of my head, but so you wouldn't have to pay for going or attending the annual planning meeting again, because that's already part of your membership. And if the parents have passed away, then that membership is active. So we just contract for the additional visits you want to surround that membership. So I probably could have put some costs there for comparison, but it's not quite $460. $460 is we go to the annual planning meeting. That's all we do for the year, because it takes us longer to get involved for somebody who's an inactive member, just to figure out what's going on and things, than it would be for somebody that we're serving through the lifelong advocacy program. So did that answer the question?
I think so. If anyone has any follow-up questions, feel free to put it in the chat right now. Our next question says, this is about sibling advocacy. It says, what if my child doesn't have a sibling to advocate for them after I pass? Do you need a different family member that you would work with in order for us to become a member or use BTS services?
Well, that's an excellent question. I didn't make that very clear, and I should have. Not having a sibling advocate is a prime reason why families involve us, because there is no sibling advocate. And so what we do is we use the information that we gathered from the family, and then we get involved, and we are the advocate. And it's really been great, because people tend to stay a long time. The advocates are not like in a point in their career where they're looking to job change, because they've already retired for the most part. Some have gone into a different field and still want to do this, so they might be doing both. But so advocates are actually able to form that relationship and carry that information forward. When an advocate is involved with somebody, each contact, whether it's a visit or a planning meeting, they need to document in progress notes, so that, and then when they send us their invoice for their time, they send us their progress notes for the month for those people that correspond with that. So we have a building and developing file for each person that they're serving. And so if they were to leave, then we have still the history and the progress notes there that we then would provide to the next advocate. So that the transition doesn't happen too often, but we do have the history and the information there. And I think that we've been really helpful in keeping that kind of relationship going with people. And actually, I think people appreciate that there's somebody that comes to see them. That's their person. Like other people have a family member or whatever. Well, this is my advocate, and people can be quite proud to have their advocate come to visit. It's kind of nice.
Well, that's nice. And then we have. Actually, this question just came in. Is your pricing for advocacy of one person, what if you, and this is something that we've seen in our agency as well, what if you have two children who have a disability and both qualify for DDA?
Mhm. So the price is kind of what it cost us to do it. So the price is still what it is, kind of unfortunately, but that's the only way we can really work it. We do have a small pool of money that can be considered scholarship money. And so we would, in order to be eligible for that, you can just, submit the request along with some in like your last tax return or something, because the board wants to kind of target that, and make that available for families with lower income. So if that's a particular need that you have, then that might be something that could be worked out.
Okay. And then our next question says, what if someone in your family has COVID, like the individual's family, the consumer's family? Would you all still do a visit, or would it be a virtual visit? Or would it be put off until that period has passed?
Yes, so that's a good point. Since the middle of March, through the board of directors, we have restricted all in-person visits. So we're doing all of our advocacy by telephone, by FaceTime, by Zoom meetings, and that's for the protection of the person that we serve, for their families, and also for the advocates. I mean, it's just, and I do think that where we already have been working with people, we have the relationships with the staff and with the person, and I think that goes very well. They know who we are. That I think people are pretty up and up on, and we ask, are there any needs, and they'll tell us if there are needs, and we follow up with the residential agency. In one case, we called and said, so how's the guy doing? And they said, oh, good. And it's like, what have you been doing lately? And oh, well, we've been playing these games and these puzzles and things like that, and it's, sometimes we go to the Royal Farm store, and it's like, really, so they explain how they went to the Royal Farm store, and you put on a mask, and then, when they got back home, they would use the hand sanitizer. And that that wasn't the agency policy, and the agency policy was nobody was going out. And so, the advocate just kind of passed that along, and that got straightened out, because I guess the staff person misunderstood that. But so it's good to have somebody checking in. We also, at the beginning, back in April and May, we were able to obtain some of the grant funds from the Maryland Developmental Disabilities Council in ARC, Maryland, to purchase social engagement activities for people. So we've purchased about 40 items, and they're based on for the people who were, they could no longer go to day programs, they were staying at home. And it's, you have things to do at home, of course, at your house, but eventually those things get pretty boring, because we're all going stir crazy here. So we found out what kind of things the specific people that we were purchasing for really wanted and really liked to do. And then we made purchases on Amazon and had them shipped for free to the person's house, and so that they had some kind of new and different kinds of things to do. When people had special needs trusts, we made the request directly to the trustee, and now we're going back and doing another round because people have been home for over a long time again. So I think the pandemic's kind of unusual. Very unusual.
Well, yes, that is the understatement of the year, I think. For sure. We had another question come in. It says, will the same advocate work with my child through the year, or will he see different advocates? And I think you kind of touched on that a little bit, but maybe elaborate.
Good question. So we assign an advocate if you do an annual advocacy plan, we assign you an advocate, or if somebody's, the parents pass and we need to get them started up with their annual assessment visit, we assign an advocate. So that's their advocate. So from one year to the next year it's the same advocate, so long as that advocate's still here. And so there's continuity there. And we have not had a lot of turnover. Sometimes it does happen. I mean, you can't tell how people's lives are going to change, but I think we've been doing very well with it.
Awesome. And then I think maybe our last question for this section, and I think you would have a very good perspective on this, a special needs trust versus an ABLE account. Are both needed or recommended in your opinion? Now, we just had Maryland ABLE on here a few months ago, so we heard a little bit on their perspective. What do you think? What is your perspective?
Well, I do have some thoughts about that.
Go ahead.
So one thing to keep in mind that sometimes families, isn't immediately clear is that when you have a special needs trust, there are two kinds. One is a third party discretionary trust that's set up by the parents or the family member, or grandma left you some money, and well, no, that doesn't work. But it's set up by the parents, and they might set up this trust, and other relatives could put money into it. But that money can be used at the discretion of the trustee. And then there's another kind of special needs trust, which is the self-funded or first-party special needs trust, which has money that is my money. The person's money goes into that trust. And so, like, that's the example where if grandma left me money, then all of a sudden I have thousands of dollars and I'm over my $2,000 limit for Social Security. So I lose my Social Security and my medical assistance. I lose my federal match for the waiver funding, and I'm in big trouble, And so, and I don't know that DDA's actually kicked anybody out in those circumstances, but it's not a good situation. So what people do in those circumstances is they get a first party or self-funded special needs trust set up. And, you can go through some of the pooled special needs trust organizations to do that. So those are the two kinds of trust. So if you have a self-funded trust, then your money can go into it. So you probably don't need an ABLE account, because if you had extra money coming in, you would just put your money into the self-funded trust. The self-funded trust is subject to Medicaid payback upon your passing. So if the third party or family funded special needs trust, that's not subject to Medicaid payback. You can name a remainder beneficiary for those funds. And however, if my money as the person in services is put into that third party trust, the whole trust becomes subject to payback for medical assistance. So you don't want to mingle my money with that third party special needs trust. In that case, you really need an ABLE account if you're having issues with maybe spend down because you keep getting more than 2,000. The other thing I'd like to say, just to keep aware of, is where people, and sometimes it does happen, but in my experience, there are people out there who are dealing with spend down quite often, and it seems to be a problem. And so the agencies are going out and doing ABLE accounts, or they're starting self-funded trust for people. But my take on it is, what I'm seeing for those people is that they could be helped to be spending their money more often, because they're not going out and doing much, they're not buying much, and it seems to be only a concern of the agency when it gets to be too much and their benefits are at risk. So what can we do to help people access their money and enjoy their lives a bit more? So that's just something that we like as advocates to think about with planning teams. It's like, well, so where are the funds, and what would you like to do with your money, and do you like to go on a vacation? So there are options for people. And I think, that's just kind of an aside, but it's something to think about.
Right. Mm-hmm. And then we had a request to talk about the personal health profile.
Oh, okay. So this is a pretty exciting thing, I think. It's a personal hospital profile. And we originally identified that we would like to be working on something like this when there were a number of people that we served over the course of maybe 2 years or so, who were going into the hospital, and then the hospitals would have no idea of what their actual support needs were. And if you're enrolled in a DDA residential agency and you're funded through the waiver, the federal, with half federal dollars, the waiver will not pay, because it's paid through your medical assistance. Medical assistance will not pay for residential staff on the same day it pays for an inpatient hospital stay, because that they call that double dipping, because you're in the hospital, so you don't need a resident, so they don't want to pay for both. However, if your residential staff person's not there, the hospital really doesn't know what your support needs are. So there are examples like the guy who went on vacation, came back, and his behavior was very unusual. He was kind of crawling across the floor instead of walking, and they took him into the hospital, and he was severely dehydrated. And so he was he was admitted. He had he was, I guess, IV or some, I don't, whatever. But he was admitted. And when his aging mother came to visit, she said, and there he was sitting in his bed with his tray table, with his styrofoam cup, how they do in hospitals with the plastic lid with the straw. And she said, he can't drink from a straw. And so he was getting no hydration from the water that they were giving him because they didn't realize he couldn't drink from a straw. Now, granted, he probably did have an IV, but he also lost a lot of weight while he was there because the staff didn't realize, this, if you call and say, how is somebody doing? And this happened with somebody that I work with, actually. You call and say, how's he doing? Oh, good, but his appetite's not good. What do you mean? Well, he's not eating much. Well, do you know you need to actually cut up the food and then help him to eat it? And they did not know that. And so they just assumed that that the person wasn't maybe very hungry. And so we were getting ready to start kind of a group of hospital professionals and an interdisciplinary group to kind of problem solve what would be a good solution to this. And then we actually had identified our team, and who's going to be, and we're going to start to schedule something. And then COVID came up, and the hospital's staff and the medical professionals were incredibly busy and really couldn't do it. But yet we felt we really need to do this because now more than ever are we likely to have people that we serve go into the hospital. So we did it. And so we developed this hospital profile. Personal hospital profile. We had it reviewed by a couple medical professionals, and they gave us some suggestions. So what it looks like is it's a single page. It's on one side of a page. It's bulleted, and it's separated into like 6 sections, and that's all that you can put on there because the hospital staff said that's all we have time to take in. If we're really going to read it, it needs to be short. So you need to pick what you want us to read, and that's what we'll know. So it starts off with what's important to the person. Like if you want to make a connection with this person, it helps to know they really love trains, or they have this job doing this or whatever. So it helps you form a connection. And the next section is about their disability. And so how does what is the disability and how does it affect them? Because nurses would say, well, we know he's got a disability, but we have no idea what it was. We didn't know if he wasn't talking to us because he couldn't or because he just wasn't feeling good, So we provide the information about the disability, or we don't provide medication or diagnoses because we want them to get current information from the provider when they bring them in. And then another section is about communication. And it's like, how does the person communicate? What kind of support do they need? And more importantly, if the person if they're in pain or if they have symptoms, are they able to reliably communicate that? Because some people, you ask if you have it and they'll say yes, or they try to anticipate what you want to hear and they might say that, and it interferes with the diagnostic process because you think you got an answer, but some people just can't say, and so we got that information out there. And then we're talking about what are the daily support needs. There's the next section, like I need help with with eating my food, or I need reminders to go to the bathroom every 2 hours, or I may be incontinent. Rather than just putting people in diapers, let's give them reminders. Or an adult, depends. So it's kind of like, and what other adaptive equipment they need and things like that. And then how can you best support me to make me feel more comfortable while in the hospital? If I'm anxious, what works for me? If I have to get a shot, what, does it help to hold my hand, or, what helps, or what kind of language helps, And that's very specific to the person. So this information we're gathering from family members that we're interviewing direct care staff who work with the person who go on medical appointments. So we're putting that all together. And then another section is, who are the contact people who can tell you more about me, or to contact if I need something, like the residential staff, the family members, their phone numbers, whatever. And then the last section is on who helps me with medical decisions. Do I like to make my own? Do I want to be it's important to me to be involved, but maybe I do need this, who's my power of attorney, or who's my guardian, or whatever. So we kind of got it all on one sheet. So if somebody has to go into the hospital, they can take that with them. So that's what we developed. And if you need that, I'd be happy to share a copy of that with you so that you can develop one for your relative. We did just get a grant from Civitan that would allow us to kind of reach out and involve. The exchange for that, though, would be we want to survey the healthcare professionals who have been working with the person in the hospital to see what they recommend as far as changes. So we would want you to kind of get some survey information back if you had to use it. But that's the partnership there. So we do have some funds to work on that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I can see how that would be so valuable, especially if someone didn't have another advocate available to help them during that time.
Yeah. Now with COVID, originally they weren't letting caregivers go in, but
Right.
now they will. You can go in, a staff person can go into the hospital with somebody who has a disability if they need support.
Yes.
So the hospitals aren't allowed to refuse the caregiver to go in with them. But can they be there the whole time? Maybe not.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. I think those are all of our questions.
Okay.
So to wrap up, first of all, Kathy, thank you so much. I've heard this presentation umpteen times, and every time I hear it, I either learn something new or come at our own situation with a different point of view.
Mm-hmm.
And I look at some of the faces here tonight and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, these people are thinking, I should have done this, I should have done that. What if? How come? Presentations like this make a mother nervous sometimes, because you feel like there's lots of work to do. And there's always work to do with our kids. But it's one step at a time, one little bit at a time. I would have to say, even if you don't join By Their Side, which I think you should, the letter of intent is so important for people in your child's life to have if you aren't available to participate in decision making.
Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up, Mary. And I forgot, I would like to mention that our website is bytheirside.org. Here's our contact information. You're welcome to call me if you have any questions or if you want, to run something by. But on bytheirside.org, we also have in our resources section, there's future planning resources. And we had a work group of parents and some aging professionals and disability professionals and a group working on this same question about, I've set up my special needs trust. What's next? And then the other question was, I don't have a sibling. What am I going to do? What about, how do I plan for that? And so there were a lot of the first part of the work group was the parents identifying what are the issues, and then we did a lot of research about those issues. So in a lot of cases there's not new information, but we pulled together resources to answer some of the questions that the parents had to begin with. So that's up on our website, so you're welcome to browse around up there and see if there's anything that can give you some new ideas.
And we'll be able to send this information out by email too. So if you haven't put your email in the chat yet, go ahead and put it in there and we'll make sure we email that to you tomorrow or the next day.
So I don't know if this PowerPoint would be that helpful because it doesn't have a lot of the information. It's got more of the headers, but I do have another document that I think covers the information that I was talking about. But I think that might be good to send out.
Sure, okay. Definitely.
Mm-hmm. I have a quick question. It's just kind of semantic, but the email is info@bytheirside.org.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or you can send it directly to me at kvecchioni, VECCHIONI @bytheirside.org.
Great.
I'm not sure if we have anybody in this group who uses self-directed services with their child. For their child. Annie and our family use self-directed services. So some of the issues are a little bit different. So that's one of the things that as the board president, I'm going to suggest that we start looking into and thinking about a little more in greater depth, because some of the issues are different if you're using self-direction. So if there's anybody on the Zoom who's using self-direction, I don't want you to feel left out because you don't have agency staff.
Yeah, that whole transition thing about when the parents aren't here any longer is going to be a real challenge.
Yes.
Good issue. It's a good issue to look into.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for spending your evening with us. We really appreciate it. I know we had so much interest in this presentation. I know we're going to have a lot more questions, so we'll make sure to pass your information out, get everything sent out to everyone, and they know they can contact you by phone or email if they have any questions.
Oh, it was our pleasure. Thanks so much for inviting us.
All right, I'm going to stay on for a few minutes. You can feel free to go, but if you have any extra questions, I'm going to turn our recording off and you can just let me know or send them to me in the chat, okay? All right, thanks everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.